And so this is just one of a deliverable that came from the meeting that was earlier this year.
Okay, so the USAI money is going to the Czech defense base?
To the refurbishment of these tanks, which are owned by the Czech Republic, yes.
Okay, and then the Czechs will send them. So how long will it take for those tanks to actually get to Ukraine?
Just a minute here. I believe we are anticipating so the contracting actions are going to begin soon, and then some of the tanks will be available to Ukraine before the end of December, so the end of this year, with additional deliveries to be completed in 2023. Great.
And then, sorry, if I could just follow up on the security assistance group to Ukraine that you announced. Is that an evolution of the Defense Contact Group, or is it a separate thing?
Separate. So the security assistance group, so the SAG-U, it's not a new mission. This is a more effective and streamlined way to manage the process. And this is a continuation of building on the work that the 18th Airborne Corps already had done in the region. And so the SAG-U is a logical way to continue to provide short-term assistance, but also long-term assistance to Ukraine. And as you saw, the president spoke to this in Madrid, that we remain committed to Ukraine for as long as it takes. The SAG-U is going to help with those long-term efforts. Great. I'll go to Barbara in the back.
Sabrina, on your own public website, you posted remarks from Admiral Charles Richard, head of the U.S. Strategic Command, and he said in the remarks just yesterday, as I assess our level of deterrence against China, the ship is slowly sinking. It's sinking slowly, but it is sinking, as fundamentally they're putting capability in the field faster than we are. Those curves keep going. It isn't going to matter how good our operating plan is, or how good our commanders are, or how good our horses are. We're not going to have enough of them, and that is a very near-term problem. So he oversees much of America's nuclear force, and he's put in a time frame and specifics on this just days after you released your military strategy and your nuclear posture review, a very near-term problem. You don't have enough commanders, you don't have enough weapons. I don't know what he really means about you not having enough horses, but is this not, do you have concerns that this is an operational security problem, that he has now been so specific about the lack of American capability, nuclear capability against the Chinese, and that he's put a time frame on it, very near-term problem?
So I think we feel very confident in our capabilities when it comes to China, or just generally in the Indo-Pacific. The Secretary laid out in his national defense strategy that China remains our pacing challenge. We know that in order to compete with China, we are doing more when it comes to our own readiness and our on our own exercises. But I think we definitely are monitoring things that are happening in the Indo-Pacific and remain ready to act if needed.
So you have no concerns about what he publicly said, that we have a very near-term problem?
I would refer you to Admiral Richards for more on that.
Can I ask you also very briefly, last Friday there was not an insignificant security breach at the Pentagon, which was never publicly revealed. A suspect in a high-speed vehicle made it a good distance around the perimeter of the Pentagon before law enforcement could stop this suspect. I think everyone believes that the law enforcement officers absolutely did the best they could, so it's not about them. But why was the Pentagon workforce not told that there had been such a significant intrusion in perimeter security that somebody made it a very significant distance around the building through 2 security barriers? The public statement that came from PIFBA management only said that they stopped the person quickly, never acknowledged that this suspect made it past 2 perimeter security points. And are you reviewing perimeter security?
So thank you for the question. Just in terms of answering the question, first say that we are incredibly grateful for our PIF police officers for everything that they did to apprehend the driver and keep this building secure. We do not announce security threats to the Pentagon nor comment on law enforcement issues, especially when there are ongoing investigations or pending legal action. The only exception to that is if there is an immediate safety issue, and there was not at the time. That was not assessed. So Secretary Austin, our leadership here has full confidence in our PIF police, in our Pentagon force protection, and we thank them for what they did last week. I'm going to take, Rio.
Thank you. Just one quick question for
Sure.
North Korea.
Yeah.
How much is the Pentagon seriously concerned that the recent North Korea's provocations could lead to miscalculation and unintended military conflict on the Korean Peninsula?
Well, I think you were here yesterday. You saw the secretary and his ROC counterpart speak to this. The actions that North Korea has taken with missile launches continue to destabilize the region. But I would say further commit ourselves and further, I would say, build our alliance when it comes to South Korea and Japan. As you know, we're conducting Vigilant Storm now. That exercise was extended for another day in order to shore up not only our alliance, but to show that our strength and that we can deter aggression when needed. I'm going to go to the phones and then I'll come back into the room. Here we go. Sorry about that. Jeff Schogel.
Thank you. I understand if these questions have to be taken, but can you say which variant of T-72s the U.S. is paying for, whether they have any type of active denial system? And I believe they have a 125 millimeter gun. Where is the ammunition coming from, considering DoD has often said that post-Soviet stockpiles and new NATO members are exhausted?
So, thanks, Jeff, for the question. In terms of where the ammunition is coming from, when I have more details or anything more to announce, I'd be happy to get back to you on that. I don't have more specifics on the tanks themselves. They're the T-72 tanks. They are sourced from the Czech Republic defense industry. So I just don't have more on that. I'd be happy to take that question, though, and get back to you. Great. I'm gonna take one more from the phone, and then I'll come back into the room. Idris, Reuters.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hi, I'm sorry, this is still Jeff Schogel. The T-72 is a fairly old design. Can OSD say why it's not providing newer tanks like the Abrams, the Leopard, or even Korean tanks?
Jeff, as you're right, these are Soviet-era tanks. These are tanks that the Ukrainians know how to use on the battlefield. And again, we are providing these in coordination with the Netherlands and the Czech Republic. In terms of why aren't we providing new tanks or American tanks, introducing a new main battle tank is extremely costly, it's time sensitive, and it would be a huge undertaking for the Ukrainian forces. So we do continue to consult with our allies and partners to assess our ability on what we can provide in terms of Western armor platforms, but these tanks, we believe, will make a difference on the battlefield. Let me just, since Idris was not there, I'm just going to take Heather's question, then I'll come back in the room. So Heather, USNI.
Two quick questions. I was hoping you could tell us if you've gotten any information about the attack on Sevastopol. Now I know that we still haven't gotten a damage assessment, and then I was wondering if you can give us any further information on the Riverine boat you mentioned. And I think Idris was trying to speak in as well.
Back to Idris after you. In terms of Sevastopol, I don't have any more information there for you. We've seen the open source reporting, but I don't have more to add to that. In terms of the 40 Riverine boats that we are providing Ukraine, this is, again, not the first time that we've provided these armored boats to Ukraine, but how and when the Ukrainians use them is up to them and their decision. So with that, I'm just going to go to Idris, and then I promise I'm coming back in the room. Sorry. Okay, Idris, are you there? Sorry, you'll find me, I'm sure, and we'll talk. Yes, right over here. Yeah.
North Korea. So yesterday, Secretary Austin and South Korean Minister Lee reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to deploy U.S. strategic assets to the Korean Peninsula.
Yep.
And during the press conference, Secretary said that U.S. don't have plan to change permanent positioning or stationing of strategic assets. So my question is how U.S. will increase the frequency and intensity of deployment of strategic assets to the peninsula?
Well, I mean, I don't have anything to announce today on any new deployment of strategic assets, but I think Vigilant Storm, the exercise that's ongoing now, speaks for itself. And an opportunity presented itself to extend that exercise for a day, which allowed some additional flying operations with our ROC counterpart. And, you know, these exercises increase confidence in our joint operations. And again, you know, this is not the last exercise. We will continue to do exercises with South Korea or Japan when opportunities present itself. But I don't have an announcement to make of any redeployment of any assets. Great. Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'll come back to you, Idris, since you couldn't get on the phone. Go ahead.
Yesterday, Secretary Austin and his South Korean counterpart said if North Korea uses a nuclear weapon in any threatening way, it would be the end of the regime. Can you just speak to that a little bit and define what exactly North Korea would have to do for the U.S. and South Korea to end the regime?
So I'm not going to speculate on hypotheticals or get ahead of any decisions. I think those comments stand for themselves. We've been crystal clear that any threat to our partners and allies in the region or U.S. personnel, we would certainly respond. But I'm not going to get into hypothetical situations on what that response would look like or what type of response it would warrant.
Would it involve testing a tactical nuclear weapon?
Again, I'm not going to get into hypotheticals, but thank you for your question. Idris, and then I'm coming back to the front.
Just a clarification on the Hawk air defense missiles.
Sure.
So is it funding to refurbish them for a future presidential drawdown? I was just confused about that.
That's right. So this will be funding through the USAI package that because these missiles need to go into contract for refurbishment, then they would get announced in the PDA because it would be coming off of our shelves. But the contract to refurbish these missiles would have to go out for them. I'm not going to get into how many we're supplying just for OPSEC reasons, but don't have an exact timeline yet. I think, I don't have an exact timeline on that. I'm sorry.
And just on the joint statement yesterday with the South Koreans, there was a line saying the two countries pledged to do more to advance the alliance commitment and just generally the alliance. What does that look like in terms of doing more? What more can you do?
Well, I think the Secretary and Minister Lee spoke to this when they were here at the podiums. Part of that is continuing our joint exercises, deepening our bilateral relationship, and also trilateral cooperation within the region. But part of that is having the dialogue that we did just yesterday. Part of that is having this open communication between our two countries to talk through the threats that we see both in the Indo-Pacific and also the acute threat of Russia, but also to discuss more areas where we can work together as two countries. Great. Yes.
Just a few more follow-ups on the tanks.
Sure.
So is this the first provision of tanks to Ukraine by any country, or?
I would have to check on that. I don't know if other allies have provided these tanks before, but I know from the United States perspective, this is the first time that we are paying for these tanks to be used in Ukraine.
Then the second question. So I have the impression. So it seems that some countries were sort of waiting for the other to go first in terms of the provision of tanks. I guess, especially in terms of Germany. Is this something that could potentially shake loose some further provision of tanks to Ukraine?
Well, it's hard to speculate on what this could potentially as in your words, shake loose or what other countries will commit to. But I think it's important to note that this agreement came out of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. We're seeing continued progress with over 50 countries meeting at the last meeting to talk through what does short-term and long-term support look like for Ukraine. So I think the Ukraine Contact Group has been incredibly successful in uniting our partners and allies in supporting Ukraine and also making sure that they get the warfare capabilities that they need on the battlefield. Yeah, I'll take Laura, and then I'll come to you.
Just two follow-ups. First,
Sure.
on the Hawk missiles, is this the first time the U.S. is paying for them to be refurbished?
Yes.
And would you say the ally that's sending them?
This is all the information that I'm going to get into, but in terms of
ally.
Well, these are our air missiles that will be refurbished.
Oh, they're ours.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you're getting the tanks confused with the Hawks. So the tanks, the T-72s are from the Czech industrial base. These are our Hawk air missiles that have to be refurbished. As you know, we don't use the Hawk systems anymore.
Okay, so we're paying for their refurbishment, and then we'll send them to Ukraine.
That's right.
Okay, and then the 250 M117 armored vehicles. Is
Sure.
that the first time we're sending armored vehicles?
I would have to check. No, we've sent armored vehicles. Well, let me check. I'm going to take that question because I don't want to misspeak on that. But
Vehicles.
yeah, and I just want to make sure that it's clear that these. This is the first time that we're sending these particular armored vehicles. I just want to make sure that it's clear that these are going to be intended to be used through the Excess Defense Articles, which is a program that services can use to declare equipment in excess and make available for allies and partners. So this often includes older equipment, equipment that's in need of service and repairs or upgrades, and they just no longer meet the services requirements. And so that's why we are
we're sending those through USAI, not PDA.
They have to be refurbished first, so they have to go out for a contract for refurbishing. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Yesterday, President Biden, during his campaign rally in San Diego, he said, "We are going to free Iran." So, does that mean there are any plans, especially here in the DOD, maybe to assist the protests there? Or any steps that maybe lead to change the regime in Iran?
So I would refer you to the White House to speak more to the president's comments. Again, we have been clear from this podium, and I think my other counterparts have been clear that we're seeing peaceful protests take place, and this is the Iranian regime's attempt to violently suppress them, and we just urge that they allow these peaceful protests to continue. I'll take,
Second question,
Yeah, that's okay.
About Ukraine. Recently, the attacks on power and water sources across Ukraine, especially around the capital, has been increasing too much. What more can be done to stop those attacks?
Well, I mean, the attacks that Russia is launching, I mean, certainly today, Vladimir Putin has the choice to end this war. Those strikes could certainly start by his decision. In terms of how to stop those attacks, I mean, we are, as you're seeing from this package, we are giving more aerial defense systems to the Ukrainians to do just that. The Hawk missiles that we're giving, the Hawk is a mid-range surface-to-air or guided missile that has a longer range than the Stingers that we provided earlier this year. So that will be able to help the Ukrainians further on the battlefield. But look, the Ukrainians are doing what they can to push back against these brutal attacks, and I think we're seeing them being successful. We're seeing their counteroffensive continue to go on. We're seeing, Russian forces, shoring up their defensive lines, but we are seeing the Ukrainians make success not only shooting down some of these drones, but just on the battlefield itself. Great. Yeah, I'll take a few more, and then I will have to wrap up because there's another event in here soon. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for taking my question.
Yeah.
I have a question about the North Korea.
Sure.
How much do you concern about the possibility of the North Korea conducting nuclear tests in the near future? And does Pentagon see any indication of the nuclear tests?
So we remain concerned about the prospects of any nuclear test. We know that the North Koreans have made preparations for such a test. And this assessment, remains consistent with what we have said from the beginning, but we certainly remain concerned. And which is why, and you heard the Secretary and his ROC counterpart speak to this yesterday, we're in very close touch with our allies and partners in the region. And should there be such a test, we would be able to respond quickly if needed. Great. I'm going to make just a few more and then, yeah, go ahead.
Just regarding the continuing resolution, and obviously the department has a lot of modernization programs and priorities, as Barbara alluded to, in terms of closing the gap with China.
Yeah.
Where right now are the biggest areas of concern of what's being held back by the continuing resolution, which, given the elections next week, potential change in Congress could be going into next spring?
Well, as you know, I wouldn't really be able to speak to so much of what is happening in Congress and potentials of the package. As you know, we put forward a budget. We urge Congress to pass that budget. The continuing resolution, of course, limits some of the things that we are able to do. So, we would urge Congress to really look and see if they, can pass the budget that the Secretary put forward. Yeah.
And just in terms of the current situation, are there any particular programs that are most affected or where you're having to scramble the most to try to deal with the current resolution?
I wouldn't get into, I'm not going to speak to any particular programs that are impacted. I mean, as you're seeing, our aid to Ukraine continues, our support and our exercises continue, so we are still being able to operate. But again, while the continuing resolution does limit some of the things that we are able to do, it is important that Congress, pass a budget so we can expand on those. Okay. I'm going to wrap up here. Thanks, everyone, for coming in today. Happy Friday, and I hope you have a good weekend.